Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for another restful episode of true, scary stories to help you fall asleep. Today, we're going to be reading stories about true near-death experiences. I hope you enjoy them. So, without further ado, lay back, relax, and enjoy these true, scary stories. I grew up in Maine, and I always loved swimming in the big waves that come just before the summer thunderstorm. I had been a lifeguard in college and was always healthy and physically fit, and was a good swimmer. On this particular occasion, I was 33 years old, and it was late summer at Long Sands Beach in York, Maine. This particular day, there were only surfers out there, and the waves were huge, but I went in anyway without a wetsuit. Without anything except for me. Unbeknownst to me, there was an enormous rip current that sucked me maybe a mile out. I went way out past the surfers, out into the deep ocean, where it was quiet, and I just had the clouds above me. I tried zigzagging against the current back and forth like I've been trained to do to get back, but it didn't work. I tried swimming against the current, but that didn't work. I tried doing nothing, but it didn't work. I just got further and further out. I was so tired. I had been swimming for about an hour, trying to get out of it. Finally, I just tried swimming and swimming and swimming against the current. I got extremely exhausted, my arms completely cramped up, and I could do nothing but flail. I gave up, starting to sink, knowing that I was about to die. Suddenly, an enormous force came into me and thrust me through the rip current toward the shore. It was unbelievable. It defied the current, transporting me through it for several minutes. It pushed me all the way up to the shore, where I collapsed and lay until having the strength to stand and walk to the car. At the end of an archery shoot that my dad and I were on right after my junior year of high school ended, as we were looking for the loop trail back down, we were just walking on the top of a hill next to another where the cemetery was, when we both hear and feel the breeze of an arrow go over our heads from the direction of the cemetery. We get behind a tree and start yelling to make sure that they didn't mistake us for an animal. No, they were actually trying to kill us, and we couldn't see them. Afterwards, we ran off the hill, which thankfully was basically a plateau with a roughly 60-degree hill of the edge that we could slide down, while another arrow nearly hit me in the back of my head. After we got down the hill, we found out that law enforcement was nowhere nearby, at least an hour away, and there was no cell service. We left immediately, reported the events, and never been back there since. The shooters have never been identified. That unfortunately put an end to my archery for a while, as I was immensely paranoid of something similar happening, although maybe not on purpose. I did become far more appreciative of things around me though. I was legitimately in danger of not existing anymore in an instant. I started talking more. I got more involved with school in the fall, etc. That moment helped me appreciate my life all the more. On April 21st of 2017, I was in my neighborhood knocking on doors and introducing myself to the neighbors. I was a first-year realtor trying to get my business going. Toward the end of a 4-hour day of door knocking, I approached a door and rang the bell. Almost immediately I felt nauseous, and I knew that I was about to pass out. I wake up to the sound of a lady speaking to 911. She was spelling my name to the 911 operator. I always wear my name badge when out. As I came to, she asked if I wanted an ambulance. I said no, I'm just dehydrated. The lovely lady was a retired RN in her late 60s or early 70s. She had her husband drive me 3 blocks back home. I began drinking water, but passed out a couple of more times. I called my girlfriend and asked her to come over as soon as she got off work. Not wanting to fall down again, I went to my bedroom to lay down. She arrived with Gatorade, and I drank part of one before throwing it back up. I passed out a few more times. I live with my older sister who was returning from a business trip that evening. When she got home, I spoke with her about passing out multiple times that afternoon. My sister insisted that we go to the ER. We all piled into my truck and my sister drove. I passed out again during the 2.5-mile drive to the hospital. The ER nurse got me on a table after checking me in. By this point, I was feeling very hungry, having missed lunch, and it was now well after 10 p.m. I explained to the staff that I had passed out at least 10 to 12 times by then. The medical staff went into the hall to discuss my case and possible treatment. I felt the nausea again and told my sister that it was starting again. She had not witnessed me passing out yet. She ran to the door and called the medical staff. When she turned around, I had flatlined. The ER staff immediately performed CPR, including shocking me with a defibrillator. When I came to, I looked at the nurse and said, "It happened again, right?" She asked if this is what has been experiencing all afternoon. I confirmed it before passing out yet again. The episodes continued for the next several hours. When they finally got me awake again, the cardiologist explained that my heart was stopping because of my vagus nerve. They decided that the best course of action would be a pacemaker. I crashed one more time as they moved me from the ER to the ICU. I remember waking up in the hall. They explained that when a patient crashes like that, they have to stop transport and get me stable again. I can only imagine the pain and fear that my family went through that evening. My part was pretty easy. Heart stops, pass out, CPR, and wake back up. Later on, I explained to my friends that I no longer fear death, having experienced it more than 30 times in one day. I am now living with my pacemaker and learning to enjoy life again. I recently started running again, and I will run a 5K this weekend for my 57th birthday. I was about 16 or 17 at the time, so about 2012 or 2013. I always took my 3 to 4-year-old brother outside to play. I was always with my brother everywhere because I was too scared for him to travel anywhere alone. That day I took him outside was like any other day. We were walking through our neighborhood and a really cold breeze fell on me. We were still in our summer clothes, so that breeze made me extra cold. We were only outside for like 10 minutes, but I told him we needed to head back now. I explained to him why we were going home, and he got so angry at me. I told him I did not care if he got angry, but we needed warmer clothes. The unusual part about this story was that I would spend hours with him outside just walking with him, but that breeze made me so cold, and this time I could not fight it. We were only 1 minute away from our house, and we finally made it in. I took my time bringing in his tricycle because it was heavy and I was being lazy. As I closed the door, we went straight upstairs so I could tell my mom that it was too cold and we needed jackets if we wanted to go back outside. As I was telling her, we heard a boom. I was confused and looked out the window. It was a man shooting a gun at someone. He was so close to our house, I could see the shells falling out as he kept shooting. Boom, boom, boom. We were so scared, and my brother hid under his blanket. I just stayed with my mom on her bed, scared. When it finally felt safe, we called the police, and I went downstairs to see the aftermath. I opened the door, and there was one of our neighborhood friends 2 or 3 feet away from my doorsteps. All I saw was blood gushing from his head. Most of the neighbors were outside at this point, and his girlfriend of the time was crying over his body because she lived in the same neighborhood. All my mom could do was cry because she said just a minute too late and we would have been outside when the man started shooting. It was pretty hard to forget, because the whole neighborhood put a memorial 2 feet from our house. We saw it every day we left or came back home. To this day, I always think of that cold breeze, and if it was a higher power telling me to go back home. So this happened yesterday. It was an evening in Bangalore, wherein the drizzling rain curtained the roads beautifully, making it slippery. I left my office around 6, riding my Suzuki Access 125 scooter. Looking at the mesmerizing sights the roads had, I was totally immersed. I never realized the raindrops beautifully dripping inside my brakes, which was causing them to lose their stopping power. I then had to take a turn to a road that had quite good traffic. That road had a downward slope, hence I eventually increased my speed. That caused the tires to lose traction, and I was slamming on my brakes. I noticed that my brakes were not doing their job. The scooter couldn't balance it, and then I slipped off the scooter and fell on the road. A huge bus which was coming behind me just couldn't stop at that second. Yet the driver took a slight curve as soon as possible. I was left there on the road by only a few millimeters from the bus tires to crush me down. I was in shock, subconscious of what just happened. People gathered around me, held me up, brought me back to my senses, and gave me some water to drink. Fortunately, I didn't have many physical injuries. Yet, that experience really scared me. I had a near-death experience when I was 12 years old. I got into a pretty violent fight with my older stepbrother. He threw me off the couch. As I was laying on the floor, he decided to point and laughed at me. I kicked him in the face 3 times, knocking out his 2 front teeth. He jumped on top of me and started choking me. My last memory is of my mom trying to beat him off of him with a broom. When I blacked out, I felt peace. Like I was home. No pain or worries. Then I heard a booming voice. "I'm not ready for you yet, David." Then I was slammed back into my body. My next memory is my stepfather with his mouth over mine, my ribs hurting and pain when I took a deep breath. There was blood all over my face, but it wasn't mine. I learned that death is nothing to fear. It's a glorious release from the pain and chains of this world. I think I developed a calm within myself, knowing that I am not as in control of things that I think I am. Learning to lean on God to overcome the difficulties of life rather than using vices. I have always yearned to go back home. I don't call it heaven, I call it home, because that's what it feels like. A place of eternal peace and love. This world I have always struggled to fit in. I don't feel like I belong here. I don't feel like it is my world. Yet, I know the consequences of trying to leave before it is my time. We are here to learn lessons, to grow. Your spirit has a mission to complete. You will not leave this world until you have completed that mission and learned the lessons you were sent here to learn. If you try to leave by your own hand, your lessons become harder and more difficult to learn with each life. Your lessons will always be the same, just more difficult to learn, before you can finally be at rest and in peace. I got accidentally locked out in the dead of winter when the snow was lying thick. I only had on a mini dress and a leather jacket, and I was pretty drunk. I decided to sit on the step, hoping my also drunk boyfriend would wake up and let me in, but he was out cold. Not as cold as me, though. After shivering for a while, I had began to feel disoriented and felt so warm. I took my jacket off and my jewelry lined up, as I was feeling tired and sleepy and quite cozy. But just as I dozed off, I had an awakening that the snow was thick and I was warm, and that definitely wasn't right. When I tried to move, I couldn't move my legs, so I dragged myself down the street to my friend's house, who was bad for not locking her front door. Thankfully, the door was open. When I got inside, the warm air was hurting my insides. My friend said that she could feel the iciness radiating from me. She rubbed my body to try to get heat back into it, and put warm PJs on me and cuddled into me to raise my body temperature. I don't remember any of this. When morning came, her dad made me porridge. I thought I was okay and had come away unscathed from my ordeal, but I was wrong. I had red marks all over my body. My cheeks and hands were the worst, and I couldn't heat up. I couldn't function. I phoned the hospital for info, and she couldn't believe that I had survived it, and told me that I should have been dead, and the reason I was so ill was hypothermia. My body had just lost the power to heat myself up. I had to drink warm soups, anything really warm that would keep the heat inside me, slowly heating me up from the inside out. It was over 6 months before I was back to normal, and now I'm terrified of the cold, or getting locked out. I was about 8 years old, and as we had in those times, a lot of freedom. I'm 74. We were playing in a flooded creek, and suddenly I was surrounded by a warm white light which surprised me as the water was muddy. Next thing I remembered was some kids had laid me on the grass, face down, and a waterfall of muddy brown water was coming out of my mouth. It was much later, likely the 1970s, when conversations around near-death experiences became a subject. This is the first time I have shared this experience. I do remember the name of one of the older boys who was pushing my back. This is one of the very few vivid childhood memories that I have. I was once exploring several caves, high on a cliff at Hookena Beach in South Kona. I had just explored one cave when I noticed another higher up. I had been inching along a 4-inch deep ledge, gripping whatever I could find to keep my balance. About halfway, I looked down and I froze up. It was at least a 75-foot fall if I had slipped. This caused me to almost panic, and I couldn't more. As I clung to some loose rocks with my fingers, I felt as if I might fall backwards. I was frozen in place and had already shuffled about 20 feet along this narrow shelf, and now I was frozen in fear, and the cave was another 20 feet away and up. Nobody around to help me at all. It took all my focus and mental strength to calm down and just do a reverse of what I did to get me there in the first place. It took me about 20 minutes to slowly shuffle back to safety, and every bit of mental energy to not fall backwards. Do not fall was my only thought. After about 20 intense minutes, I felt my foot on firm ground. I made it back to the ledge by my first cave. I guess I was so thrilled to find another cave that I didn't even think of the danger in getting there. I was on holiday in France with my girlfriend. We went swimming in the ocean near Biscarrosse. First time there, and I did not realize that we should swim between the marked dune flags, as the waters were under surveillance by the lifeguards. A riptide caught us both and pulled us out and down the coast, into an area where the waves collapsed onto sandbars. It was like being in a drum washing machine. The breaking waves kept pushing us under. I knew we were in deep trouble. I tried to get my girlfriend to lie on her back and stop fighting the current. She was rapidly running out of energy. She would not do so. I told her that we would both drown if she didn't listen to me, but nothing I said could make her do as I asked. I tried supporting her, but both of us kept going under, pounded by the waves. The game was up. I could do nothing else for her, and resolved to stay with her until the inevitable happened. I decided that when she went, I would strike for the shore with everything that I had left in me. The word meld came into my mind. I knew we would meld with the ocean. After a while, I lost my fear of dying. A song by Van Morrison, Into the Mystic, played continuously in my mind. Then I saw a flash of a brown body coming from our right, with a small red float trailing behind him. A lifeguard. Against all odds, he had spotted us, and a relay of lifeguards brought my girlfriend to shore. They were not expecting there to be two of us, so I was on my own. I struck for shore and eventually got out of the water. I was just about done. So a sense of acceptance, logic, and resignation. Then euphoria when I realized that we had both cheated death. My then girlfriend is now my wife. We went whitewater rafting in the mountains. There had been unusually large amounts of rain recently, and the Class 3 rapids had been upgraded to Class 4. It was chilly, in the low 40s, and shortly after getting on the river, it began raining furiously. I had thought the faster rapids would be a lot of fun, but actually it became somewhat painful. I kept adjusting my position to be more secure in the raft, but it was a losing battle. We dropped down some falls, and with absolutely no sensation of falling, I was suddenly under the water, spinning as the falls pounded me. I couldn't get out from under the falls, and as I spun, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace and warmth. I thought I would die, and strangely, that didn't bother me. Suddenly, I popped up into the rapids. I managed to get perched on a rock in the center of the raging river and pondered my next move. The raft was long gone, because certainly they were not able to just stop the raft just because I was gone. Eventually, I realized that I had no choice but to go back into the water. Now I was scared. I really wanted to just stay on the rock. However, I imagined my husband and the others might be concerned, so I reluctantly pushed off the rock. I remembered to lay back with my feet in front to hit the rocks rather than my head. I must admit that what followed was incredibly fun. Blasting down the river while in the water was so exciting that I forgot to be frightened. It helped that I had a great life vest and sturdy shoes as well as protective headgear. Eventually I saw the raft, as they had managed to stop in an eddy. I propelled myself towards the raft. My husband grabbed me by the vest and threw me into the raft. I never realized he was that strong. I went whitewater rafting again after that, just to prove to myself that I could. My husband passed on the next trip, as he had not enjoyed the 10 minutes as he had waited for my arrival. I died from a cardiac arrest in 2011. I was down for a long time. My husband was working a midnight shift. It happened really early on a Sunday. He used to have breakfast with the guys on Sundays. That day, he said he didn't feel right and needed to get home. He worked in New Jersey and we lived in New York City. I wasn't feeling great the last week. My body temperature was 91. You lose 2 degrees an hour, I think. I took 3 shocks at home. I was clinically dead, just not pronounced yet. My job made the paramedics take me to St. Luke's Hospital, dead. Somehow, after more CPR, they got a faint pulse. They told my husband that this wasn't great news because I was brain dead. I was in a coma. This nurse's home was Lourdes, go figure. She is my guardian angel and made them start hypothermia. They brought my body temperature down to 33 degrees and heated me back up. Now, because of me, they do it for trauma too. It resets your brain. It won't keep you alive, but prevents a ton of damage. I woke up with my brain scrambled and pretty deaf. I lost a month of memory. It took me 2 years to get back to normal, and I still struggle with technology. Google NYPD Catherine Cole chilling in Harlem. That's me in the red. The news screwed up the article. Oh yeah, when I woke up and they got my intubation out, and I told my husband that God is good. I was always agnostic. Now I believe in an afterlife. The doctors were questioning me about what I had saw. I was too overwhelmed to talk. My husband had to throw them out of my ICU room. I still don't do church, but I do believe in a higher power. Edit. My job gave me the radio rundown of the job a year later. The sheer terror in my husband's voice was so terrifying. He was doing CPR on the phone with Central. I don't know how he did that. I was down so long that my eyes were protruding and the blood had already started pooling in the side of my face. Not my time yet. I was also charged for CPR from the hospital. My insurance company asked why they billed twice. Because I lived. Hey, $750 was cheap for my life. I think I was 4 or 5 years old and living in a war-torn country. When the bombing happens, we hide. When it stops, we go out and do business as usual. On one such day, Mom and I were out, and suddenly there were sirens. And in the moment you said cookie, the streets were cleared. Everyone hid. We were left in the middle of the street, not sure of where to go. So my mom pulled me behind one building, and we lay in a whole field of nettles. Mom covered my head with something. I could hear bombs hitting the roof of the building. Pieces of it were falling all over. I heard them, but I didn't see them. I was not afraid, but more like I made peace that I was going to die. Then I saw a leaf caught in a cobweb, and I asked my mom to fetch it for me. There was a spider there as well, so I was afraid to do it myself. My mom gave me the leaf. Poor spider ended up hanging from it. I watched it climb back up and resting on the leaf. Silly thing, I know. I don't remember how long we were lying there. I don't remember how we got out. I remember that I saw photos of that building later, and on one side of the building, the one behind me and my mom's back had collapsed. I also remember my legs were red and full of blisters from the nettles. I was present at a mass shooting. I was on a first date at a bar in the hip district of my hometown. We were sitting on the patio that faces the busy street, and we were people watching. It was almost 1 a.m. on a Saturday night. The date was going well, so I just went for it and gave the girl a kiss. We were both getting hungry, so I asked her if she'd like to grab some tacos at the cart that was directly across the street from us. She looked me in the eye and said, "Let's get out of here and just go back to your place." In that moment, that's all I needed to hear, so I went inside and paid quickly. My receipt said 1:02 a.m. We left and started walking down the street to my car. Heartbreakingly, at 1:06 a.m., a gunman covered in body armor with a semi-automatic weapon emerged from a nearby alleyway and opened fire on a group of people. The people waiting in line at the taco cart. In under 2 minutes, he killed 8 and injured 26 people. We saw it happen, and I pulled my date into a little alley alcove, which is outdoor seating for another restaurant, and we hid under the table until the police, who regularly walk and patrol that street on the weekends, shot and killed the shooter. We saw people die. Bullets came our way, but luckily didn't hit us. The whole thing was over in about 90 seconds. It's been a few years, but I still get nervous in large crowds. That part of town was such a safe space for me, and it never felt like something like this could happen. But it does, and sadly, it happens a lot. My wife and I went to New York Comic Con years ago. We were outside to find a street vendor and got some halal kebabs. I ended up choking on a piece of lamb, completely blocked my airways so that I couldn't even make a sound. I did the sign for choking to my wife, but she froze. It was a crowded city street, but let me tell you, I've never felt so isolated in my life. Fortunately, the vendor noticed and did the Heimlich on me, saving my life. I fell off of a ski lift once. It was my dad and I on the lift, and we had just raised the bar as we were approaching the end station to get off. All I did was try to adjust myself to be a bit more forward in the seat so I could get off easier, and the slippery seat sent me flying off. Since it was close to the station, it wasn't a certain death fall instance, but there were also jagged rocks all around the station. Fortunately, I landed just short of them in a deep snowbank and was totally unhurt. If I had decided to adjust just a second later, I probably wouldn't be here. I was a lab tech at an industrial waste disposal company. I was cleaning up the lab, started dumping a sample in the waste bin. Huge chemical reaction / explosion. 19-liter waste container, about 6 inches from my face. Turns out, someone hadn't properly labeled some waste made up of a mix of extremely strong acids, still unknown. So I couldn't breathe. My face, neck, chest, eyes, and arms are burning. My gloves disintegrated. Fortunately, the other lab worker had clocked out, but hadn't left yet, because I wasn't strong enough to pull the emergency shower switch. To this day, I still struggle with PTSD. I moved to the bush. We were heating with firewood only, and underestimated the amount. So little old me goes out alone to just look if there were any dead trees to cut. I see one not far from the house. It was about negative 34 degrees Celsius, so I was moving as fast as possible. Lots of snow. Well, that snow was frozen like ice. I wasn't breaking through. Suddenly, that changed snow had bridged a very small gully no more than 3 feet long. But the way that I went in brought all the snow down over me. I passed out pretty fast. I came to about 7 feet from there, half my hair torn out and my GSD soaking down my face. I mostly crawled home with her logical boosting me the whole way. Family was suiting up when I reached the house. Sheba had just started freaking out. They opened the door. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Ashrak's Miss Sheba, 1993 to 1999. I was in a plane that just took off. Wasn't too far up yet. Suddenly tilted sideways and started dropping fast like a rock. Everyone in the whole plane was freaking out, doing Hail Marys and had dilated pupils. We all really thought that we were going to crash and go down. Fortunately, the pilot got the plane back on track again, and we began to climb again. But not a word was said by anyone for the whole half-an-hour flight, and no greeting from the pilot. We have arrived in, and so. Welcome and enjoy your time here, etc. That they usually say at the end. That was freaky. Really thought that we were going to bite it on that one. We must have hit an air pocket or something. Maybe a crosswind. I have no idea. All I know is that it was scary. When I was 19 years old and a student at FIT in New York City, my dorm roommates and I took a small apartment on the Lower East Side. We felt independent and very grown up to be actually living in our own, albeit decrepit and somewhat unsafe apartment. Of course, we had no laundry facilities in the building, so we would gather our laundry weekly and go together to a laundromat 2 blocks away. A weekly shared ritual that we enjoyed. We would have coffee and pastries at a nearby cafe while we waited for wash and dry cycles. We often chatted with strangers here and made quite a few new friends while doing laundry. Normal people with normal lives. Our new neighbors. We'd been in the neighborhood about a month and were together at the laundromat. It was about 11 a.m. somehow. Unusually, we were alone in the laundromat. A white guy with a long, straggly beard and rough clothes came in with a single small bag of laundry. We noticed him because he immediately introduced himself to us and asked if we wanted to smoke pot with him. We found this approach very humorous, as young black girls would. Who is this dirty white boy trying to kick it to us? Do we look like we want to smoke his bushweed with him? So we decline, gracefully. He insists on sharing his rags to Hopeful Rich's story of starting a commune in Oregon for fellow pot smokers and growers. We would be perfect residents because we are young and beautiful. And we should come back to his place just around the corner so he can show us the plans and property he is imagining. He goes on, ranting but civil, about this great utopia commune and how his community will change the world. Okay. Again, we politely decline. At this point, he lights up a joint in the laundromat and offers us a puff. This is 1990. You can't smoke weed legally or publicly. And we look at each other and silently agree to make haste out of the laundromat. We head for the door, and he follows us to the cafe. We aren't even responding anymore. He gets a little visibly agitated and starts yelling that our generation is apathetic and weak. We will never overthrow the government with such weak wills. Okay. We go back to the laundromat to get our clothes. We don't even fold the clothes because now we are nervous and just want to go home and lock the door. He follows us to our apartment, and I tell my friends we should keep walking past our place so he doesn't know where we live. He lingers in our block, so we go into Tompkins Square Park to try to lose him. A big man we have seen around the neighborhood comes over to the bench we are perched on and asks us for change. We tell him we will give him $10 to distract that hairy white guy so we can escape. We point him out. The guy says, "Oh, that's Daniel. Watch out for him. He says he killed his girlfriend." Our savior goes over to him and starts to talk. He manages to distract him until his back is turned to us, and we literally run out of the park, run home, and stay inside for the rest of the day. The very next day there, Daniel is on the front page of all the New York rags. Suspected murderer. Killed his ballerina girlfriend. Chopped her up and boiled her body for soup he allegedly served to the homeless in Tompkins Square Park. The photo is unmistakably him. The accompanying story is eerie and horrific. It turns out to all be true, and he is still in prison to this day. I got rear-ended at an intersection a few years back. I stepped out to see that the street signal was lying on the floor. Looked straight ahead and saw 2 vehicles destroyed at the intersection. Dude who rear-ended us was destroyed too. I was confused. I reasoned that the vehicle that was most damaged had caused this. It was on the opposite side of the street facing us, which was a good distance away. I went over there when someone opened the driver's side door and the guy flops out, dead. Turns out that the dude decided to unalive himself at 150 miles per hour on the surface street. He careened into the vehicle behind us, and the guy's car goes airborne, knocking down the signal light and landing on top of another vehicle that was making a left turn. I stared at the vehicle behind us in total shock, because his back seats were completely gone like a slinky dink. That could have been me. I was sitting in the back. The vehicle behind us saved us. Only fatality was the one deserved. When I was in basic training at the Army at Fort Jackson in 1967, my drill sergeant, who was a very troubled man, had a real problem with me. I've blogged about it. Twice he tried to kill me, I'm pretty sure. We had to go into what was basically a long gas chamber and then shout out our names and service numbers, and after that put on our gas masks and run through the gas chamber out the other side. The problem is, or was, that my gas mask was a wee bit defective. The canisters are there to filter the poison out of the air that we were breathing, as we run through the poison, noxious fumed room, where both filled with water. This was not fun. Of course, the sergeant who was in there was not my drill sergeant, and he thought I was just a punk chickening out when I was gesticulating wildly, trying to be allowed to run out of the place by the door that I had just gone in. I don't even remember how clearly how it was resolved, except that I did escape, and I'm still here 51 years later. My drill sergeant's second attempt, and I'm pretty sure it was deliberate. We had to scale a wall while carrying a rifle with bayonet affixed. Now, I had never done this before, and I have to trust my sergeant and his instructions on how to do this. I was at the very end of the line, which is probably not a coincidence either, and as I was running towards the wall, another sergeant, the field first, who has authority over my drill sergeant, started yelling at me to stop, which I did. Even reprimanded my drill sergeant for having me scale the wall in such a fashion that I would have turned myself into a shish kebab. If you want to know more about why, you can internet search. I'm pretty sure Sergeant Greenwald tried to kill me. Gives me chills to remember it even 40 years later. My friends and I were driving from college in Iowa to an American Chemical Society meeting over spring break in New Orleans. We didn't have much money, so we drove straight through. I got the midnight to 4 a.m. shift for driving. At about 2 a.m., I decided to stop at a gas station for coffee to keep me awake. We all went in. I walked up to the counter with my hands in my pockets of my old, bulky army jacket to ask for a cup of coffee. The clerk took out a loaded gun and pointed at me from 12 inches away. He said, and I quote directly as adrenaline enhances memory, "Boy, take your hands out of your pockets real slow." I calmly did just as I was asked, and then inquired if they did or did not wish to sell me a cup of coffee. The nervous and shaken clerk put down his weapon and apologized. Apparently, someone of my height and hair color with an identical jacket had robbed them in the middle of the night the week prior. Even offered me the coffee for free. By that time, I didn't need any. Strangest of all was that everything was in slow motion, and even after the experience, I never felt shaken, just a bit happier to be alive. When I was about 30 minutes old, I was almost murdered by a 4-year-old. It was the day of my birth, and my mother was resting on the bed because childbirth is hard. I think my dad was out of the room or something, and there was this other family member in the room. I was in the room all fresh and new after the doctors cleaned me up, and apparently ready for the taking. The woman of the other family, I don't actually know who she is and my mom never told me, but that woman is the reason that I almost died. The woman let her 4-year-old child hold me when my parents weren't looking for something. I'm not sure. This child, this 4-year-old child, I have left this lifelong grudge on the child. After a few minutes of holding me, he threw me. He threw a newborn baby because he didn't want to hold me anymore. To say that I was furious to hear this would be an understatement. Back to the story. So me, a newborn baby, was thrown by a 4-year-old child. He could have killed me because I was so fragile at the state. But luckily my dad saw him do this and caught me before I could hit the ground. I didn't, and still don't know who the child was. But even though it's been years, I still want to kick him where the sun doesn't shine. So that's the interesting story about my everlasting grudge on a 4-year-older person for throwing me across the room when I was a baby. Thanks for reading. When I was 19, I had an affair with a 30-something-year-old married woman. I didn't even think about her being married. She was hot. She would pay for the dates and hotel rooms. I thought I was living the life. She took my virginity. Her husband invited me over to their house one day. I went because I was an idiot who didn't understand what I was in the middle of. He pulled a gun and pulled the trigger as I sat down on the couch with my back to him. As in, I walked by him, then turned to get to the couch, and he was standing on the rear corner of the couch over and behind me. I heard the click, turned and saw him with the gun and clearly aiming at me, and there was another click. I ran faster than I have ever ran before, knocking him over on my way out the door. I have no clue what happened, but I think about it a lot. I don't know if he was just trying to scare the crap out of me and I wasn't in danger, or if the gun didn't work or what. Another time I was with my friend in my car in front of my house. I don't really know what happened. I must have said something that really hit a nerve and made him angry. It's a talent of mine and this was 20 years ago. He ended up on me with a knife pointing at my neck and trying to kill me. I know he was trying to kill me because he said, "I'm gonna kill you. You better hope that you're stronger than me." Luckily, I was stronger than him and laughed, because that's what they do in the movies. And he got even more angry and tried harder. I was still stronger than him. I don't remember how it ended, other than no one got stabbed or cut. I just vividly remember the knife, his hands, and his voice, even the way his breath smelled. I think about this too much as well. I had a truly crazy partner for a while. I won't say what the incident was, but there was an accident. He thought I had caused it intentionally. As I was starting to clean up from the incident, which did not, by the way, directly affect him, he just didn't like it. He was behind me. My daughter, who has a key to my house, happened in on this scene. Things got finished, and partner eventually left. Just after that, my kid told me something I had not known. While my back was to him and she was just opening the door, he had a baseball bat raised over me. She's a CCWL holder, is armed, and he knew this. She patted her purse with her free hand, and he apparently got the hint and put the bat down. Made me kind of glad that I had taken her to the range with me a year or so before that. It was a late night. The moon was very bright in the sky, with the stars swimming around the galaxies. The day seemed perfect, too perfect for anything to go wrong. But how wrong was I? I was oblivious to what would happen to me in the next few hours. Finally, my father and the driver had loaded all our luggage in the boot of the car. We had also packed some food and water bottles for the long trip to the airport. Like always, I sat near the window of the car, but I had to earn that right. Let's just say me and my sister had a cat fight over who would sit near the window, and I won. So my sister had to sit in the middle, squashed by me and my mother, who both sat opposite her. I'll never forget the dark looks my sister gave me during the ride. Then we were off. The car drew at a slow pace, regularly shuddering as the tires made contact with bumps on the road. I gazed out of the window, lost in my own thoughts, yet mesmerized by the beauty of the sky. God had sculpted the sky by himself, adding every little detail perfectly. I've always liked gazing out of the window. Several trees came into view, as well as some fields with crops growing in them. All of a sudden, the ride came to an abrupt stop, waking me up from my daydreaming. I gritted my teeth together as we had to wait for the gas to pump up in the car. Then the car started moving again, and I mentally said goodbye to the gas station. I had lost counts of how many roads we had made past, all of which were bumpy. I was lost in my own reality, my own world. It happened too quickly. 1 second, me and my sister were giggling together, my mother on her phone, and my father engaging in a conversation with the driver. The next second, we were crying, begging for our lives. Those men, clad in clothing that completely hid them, held us at gunpoint. I was frozen. My whole body was frozen. A million thoughts were running through my brain. I was numb. Numb to my sister's cries, numb to the yelling. What would happen now? I had my whole life ahead of me. For God's sake, I was still a 13-year-old girl. I was too young to die. I couldn't die like this. I couldn't die from a single bullet. A single bullet, all because of money. Money is a dangerous thing. It was what they wanted. It was the only way our lives could be spared. They took all the money my father had in his wallet. My life was nearly taken away from me, just because of money. The whole incident haunts me to this day. I always think to myself, what if I hadn't made it? What if I was killed? And those questions will never be answered. I don't know whether or not he intended to murder me, but I saw enough fury to feel convinced that he did, and I was threatened, whilst held tightly by the neck. The first time I was 17 and I felt terrified. It was my stepdad. He had just left prison for manslaughter, and crying was my natural first reaction. No, please. Had the reaction of causing him to be angrier and more threatening. He accused me of pretending to be frightened by faking tears. I was nothing but terrified. When I thought I was faced with the end, I knew ferociously that I wanted to live. I felt a surge of fury. Come on then. And how dare you do this? I think the come on then part of it did the job. It made him recoil and feel his own loss of control in the face of my furious indignation. He was frothing at the mouth. But that somehow made him step back and away from the situation. He'd ripped my bedroom door off its hinges and threw my TV at me across the room. But the real terror was when he grabbed my clothing, when I was squatted and backed into a corner. I did think that I was going to die, because I'd never seen such anger, and he had form for it. It was at the point I truly thought that I wasn't going to get out alive, that I made my own noise and showed my own fury. He walked downstairs like a little naughty kid, and as I flung open the front door so that I could flee, he poked his head from around the door and asked, "Do you want a cup of tea?" The door slammed. I ran. thank you so much for listening to all of the stories in this video. I hope you enjoyed them. I also hope that you enjoy the extra rain at the end. Get a good night's sleep, everyone, and I'll read to you in the next video. Bye-bye now.